Where is the wise man? Where is the scholar? Where is the philosopher of this age? Get down! Baltimore!
What are they getting? Everything out of me. They gonna get a Super Bowl out of me. I need that. I need that.
All right, what is up, you guys? It is Jake here bringing you another edition of the podcast. I think we're going to be dropping this one on a Wednesday towards the end of the month here in September. It's currently Thursday, the 22nd, the night of the 22nd. Just got done taping an interview with Glenn Clark of 105.7 The Fan, doing the post-game show this year with Rita Hubbard, and he's also of PressBox Online. A little bit of a staple in this town, sports media-wise. He's been with WNST, bounced around a couple of different places, and he's settled in as kind of a face in the crowd amongst the media crew, but definitely a voice that stands out amongst it. He's a guy who's got a ton of super distinctive opinions. He's very funny, very affable, and we've managed to become friends with him over the last couple of years. Spencer and I have kind of independently done his show or versions of his show, and yeah, we've just kind of become friendly, and I decided we were at an event the other night, and I kind of walked up to him and I said, hey man, when are you going to come on the podcast and chop it up with us for a little bit? And he said, hey, let's do it next week. So that was a week ago. We just got done talking with him, and yeah, just wanted to open this as a little bit of an intro for you to let you know that it was pre-recorded, so we didn't know what happened with this Patriots game that happened a few days ago, I suppose. So there's nothing on that. It's not super like current as to what's going on with the season. Hopefully the Ravens win, so what we were talking about, feels a little bit relevant or not dated, and things haven't gotten worse, I guess, but yeah, just wanted to let you know that it's not exactly current with what's going on with the week. It's a little bit more of an evergreen episode, but I hope you'll stick around for it. It was a really, really good chat between me, him, and Spencer. I had a script written down, but as often happens with Glenn, I just kind of teed him up at certain points and just let him go, and he covered half my questions with, a couple of his answers. And yeah, it was just an awesome chat about the state of media in general, the state of media in this town. A lot of great, interesting stories about the Ravens from when he moved back here in 2007 all the way up until now. It's just one of the more fun chats that we've had in a while. So really hope you guys stick around for it and enjoy it. And we'll be back with more regularly scheduled programming, a preview show for the Bills game later in the week. So in the meantime, thanks for listening to this one. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you later. All right, we now welcome on a very special guest joining us from his farm up in the middle of somewhere. I'm not gonna put you on blast for where you live. Maybe you've gone public with that. Maybe you haven't. But it's Glenn Clark of 105.7 of PressBox Online. How's it going, pal?
What's up, boys? It's good to see you. If you want to know, I am not wearing pants currently. I probably should have closed the window because it's windy as hell tonight. Is it supposed to storm? By the way, is that a thing?
It feels like, yeah, it kind of feels like it. It got really dark early tonight, so it kind of feels like the clouds are rolling in.
I don't care for that, man. Then I got to think about what I'm supposed to do. Like when you say I live in the middle of nowhere, like I legitimately live. It's northern Baltimore County. I live in the middle of nowhere, and legitimately on a farm too. So when like the storms happen, I'm going to lose multiple trees. Like it's going to occur. There's nothing I can do about it. Trees are going to come down. And then I got to remember, like, is anything parked near a tree? Is there anything? Like, I literally have to think about all these things anytime it's storms.
I was curious, is your house in the splash zone for a tree?
No, we're good. There's one really big one across the way, but I don't think that one's going to go down. I think that one, like, I say that. That's probably the dumbest thing I ever said when tomorrow I'm like, hey, by the way, guys, remember that tree I told you?
Knock on wood.
Safe? Yeah. The cool part about trees going down is I don't have one, but my father-in-law will drive over with his chainsaw. And I don't know why there are very few things that I do in my life that make me feel like a man, but like just revving a chainsaw, like for whatever reason, genuinely makes me feel like a man. And attacking a tree with a chainsaw, like literally, obviously it's not primal because nobody had a chainsaw in those ages, but like there's something about it that just makes you feel like, I'm not worthless. I actually offer something as a male figure.
Glenn, I'm not going to lie to you. I broke an axe on a tree
Yo,
about 2 months ago. And let me tell you, the Liver King would have been impressed with me.
no doubt, right? It's like just that sentence sounds manly. Like I broke an axe on a
But
tree.
it really hurted my little hands.
I was going to say, you definitely broke your wrist right along with that, but
No, I
Dude,
grunted,
that's
I
awesome.
grunted a guttural bell as I broke it.
I mean, it sucks that you lost your axe, but like, other than that, it kicks ass.
Yeah, that's a big problem I have when I lose my axe.
yeah, good.
How often do you casually bring that up in conversation, Spence? Like when you're out,
This is the second time. The first time was the day I did it on this show, I think.
I would bring it up more frequently. I would try to find a reason to just casually drop in. Hey, I don't know what you guys were doing the other night, but I was taking an axe to the tree, and man, just a little too strong. Sorry, I don't know if you guys noticed like what's going on. I would drop that in so frequently if that happened to me.
Definitely. And I guess we can start you out here. We have questions, I'm sure, knowing you, and I guess we could say friends at this point. So I think we know this one's going to take some non sequiturs, some different directions. But I guess talk of axes and whatnot. That's a good way to start here. With how about you give us the origin story a little bit on Glenn Clark and the Baltimore sports media. What's the deal with you, man? For our listeners,
it's a good story.
who might not be familiar, give us the rundown.
Well, I appreciate that. So somewhere around, I was in college, 04, 05. I was at the University of Maryland, and they asked me if I wanted to help them out with their basketball games. And I was like, yeah, that sounds cool. So I had the most boring job in the world where I would sit next to all the reporters that were there, and I would just watch to see if like anything was interesting was happening during the game. Like, was there a run? Did a team go on? This is like before the internet would tell you all of these things. So you didn't have like somebody actually had to physically note that things were going on during the course of a game. And it was cool. And I liked being there and all. And then they said, hey, 1057 up in Baltimore, they just got the rights to air our games. And they're looking for somebody that could sort of be like a Maryland expert on the air. And I was like, okay, well, that sounds like a better way to spend my day than sitting around and playing Madden all day. I guess like that would probably be a good thing to do. So I went up, and I don't know, man, I just fell in love. And it was at the time where 1057 was half a half a talk station, and then half, it was like when WHFS had a revival, and they were playing rock music on nights and weekends, and like explaining this radio station to a normal human being. Like Ed Norris was doing a conservative talk show during the middle of the day, and then they were trying to play Nirvana at night, and that was somehow supposed to be a radio station. And they just kept giving me more gigs. They were like, hey, do you want to come in and be a DJ on the weekends? And I was like, do I ever? Like, are you kidding me? That sounds amazing. I get to play Jimmy Eat World and White Stripes tunes for hours and pretend like it's some sort of skill. Like there's not a machine playing it for me. That, by the way, really broke my heart when I was a kid and learned that the DJs didn't actually have to do something on the radio. This is how old I am. So I loved it, man. Like it was incredible. And I just sort of fell in love from there, and they just kept giving me more and more opportunities. At the time, they paired me up with Bill Rowland and Chad Dukes on ESPN Radio 1300 in the afternoons. Then Anita Marks came along, and I just loved doing it. And I was doing the Norris show on 1057, and I just had a lot of fun. And then I had an opportunity to go out to Phoenix for a talk station out there. They were looking for a night show, and I was 23, and they said, we want to do a show where you guys will get drunk and party, and we will bring in the Arizona State crowd. And I said, you're going to pay me? Like, you're going to compensate me to go in from 8 to midnight every night and get hammered and like talk to strippers and like stuff like that? They said, yes, we will compensate you a small amount of money for doing that. And I said, well, that, by the way, use that screen grab, explain that to somebody. Yeah, I'll take that. And I did that for a couple years, loved it. Ended up moving to a sports talk station out there, and lo and behold, I was doing the Super Bowl, the Patriots-Giants Super Bowl in Phoenix, the David Tyree game. And Nestor Aparicio, whose son I went to high school with at Perry Hall, he was out there, and he started talking to me, and he started bugging me about coming back and doing mornings with Drew Forrester on the ill-fated WNST that passed away a few years back. And I don't know. There's just something about being home. I'm sure you guys understand that. Like, there's just something about the success that you find somewhere else is cool. But for some reason to me, it just didn't seem to mean as much as it would mean if I was home. So in 08, I came back here, spent 6 years at NST, and then I walked in one day and said, I was told that my services were no longer needed. And from there, it was just sort of figuring out in 2014. It was a new world. I wasn't leaving. I had a kid on the way and partnered up with Pressbox and, picked up a bunch of other gigs here and there, including, Rita and I being on 105.7 The Fan now. So there's probably way more interesting stories in there. There's probably way more that I'm just passing through, but I'm trying to give you the quick 2-minute version of it.
You took us in some deep places very quickly. And
yeah.
I guess my first question following that is just tell the good people about the origins of Pressbox. And I feel like Pressbox has done such a nice job bringing objective coverage for quite some time. And I love to spread their good word anytime I can. So I just want to know your own spin on Pressbox Online and I guess its history and then ultimately your involvement.
So Stan the Fan Charles started Pressbox in 2006. He had been, for those that don't know, I think a lot of people know like Stan as being sort of like a dean, like he's kind of ubiquitous and part of everything, especially baseball fans in the area. But Stan was a super relevant, like he was the talk show host. I don't know a lot of people know this, but Stan you can hear him in the background in one of the episodes of season 2 of The Wire. Like that's how Baltimore Stan Charles is, that like when David Simon was trying to be authentic, he had the cops listening to Stan's talk show because that's how Baltimore he is. So Stan, after doing radio for a long time, had moved down to North Carolina, and he too wanted to come home. He wanted to come back, and he had this idea for starting a weekly. At the time, it was a weekly sports newspaper, and of course, in 2006, that made a lot more sense than it does in 2022. But in 2006, it was niche and, it was free and everybody picked it up. You'd be at Royal Farms and you'd see Ray Lewis on the cover, or you'd see, Gary Williams on the cover, whoever it was. And you'd be like, it's free. I'll pick it up. And, I had such respect for them. When they launched in 2006, I remember Stan coming on air with us and being really excited about it. And I don't think he remembers it at all. I actually pitched then trying to write a column for Pressbox. And he was like, no, you're a 23-year-old kid. What the hell do you know? Like, I'm not going to go that route. And, when this all happened in 2014, when WNST died, I don't know. I was just looking for partners at that point. I had talked at length with Channel 2 about the job that Sean Stepner ended up taking. And I had talked to some other people about, I was working down at 106.7 in DC and 99.1, which was a news station at the time. And I went in and had a conversation with Stan and his business partner, John Colson. And I just, their vision for, hey, we can't just be a newspaper anymore. Those days are dying. We need to figure out what we're going to be moving forward, kind of fit with like, hey, I need to figure out what I'm going to do because I'm not leaving. I'm not going to another market. And at the time, there was a particular person at 105.7 that was not a fan of mine. And so that was not going to be an option for me. So I just sort of had to figure out my deal. And it was kind of a really good meshing point. But to your point, Spence, like Pressbox really is sort of like the last kind of, and that's not fair. The Sun still exists and the Sun is still doing good sports coverage for the most part, but really independent, just kind of news, just, telling you stories, introducing you to athletes that maybe you don't know about in the area. Like, there's still high school coverage there. There's still local college coverage. Like, we'll tell stories about Morgan State athletes and about like Coppin volleyball players and really trying to cover area sports, in a broad sense and not being hyper focused. So that always fit for me. That was kind of my deal as a talk show host is, obviously I get Ravens, Orioles. That's what matters in town. Like, I'm not an idiot and I do want people to listen to my shows. So like, I'm always going to be heavy with that, but I'm a storyteller at heart. Like, I'm not, you guys obviously are big X's and O's guys. Like, you really dive into that stuff and it's just never been my jam. Like, I'm more a sports as entertainment person and I appreciate it. Like, I need you to explain things to me because I'm an idiot. Right. But to me, sports has always been an entertainment thing and telling stories and, hey, you should know about this amazing thing that's happening with a McDonough women's lacrosse or girls lacrosse player is more my style and more the way that I like to do things. So it really was for me kind of a perfect fit ending up over there.
Yeah, I think I consider myself sort of in that vein too a little bit, where I try not to be as, self-serious with the fact that this is just kind of a side gig right now, but I do kind of look at myself more as that sort of storyteller. And I think it's an interesting kind of way that you put it there, where I'm curious what it was like being, young and in the business when that Rubicon was kind of crossed from, holy shit, newspapers are dying, what are we going to do?
Right. Oh, I mean, I'm still dealing with now. Like, it's great being at 105.7, but we can all be honest here. Radio's dying, right? Like, we don't have to hide anything. It's the same thing. In fact, that was kind of what happened to me in 2014 when WNST went under, and everybody get talking to me about like what radio station you go to, what radio station you're going to go to. I had two business partners at the time, and I said to both of them, I'm like, radio's not my priority, man. Like, and they didn't get it. They didn't understand what I was saying. I said, I just don't think we need radio. I've always tried to be a little bit forward in that way. Like, I definitely was doing podcasts even when I was in radio before, it even made sense to. I was doing a podcast that nobody was finding because it was still at a time where people were like, what? Like, what time does it air? Like, I was still doing that stuff like in 2006 and writing blogs that, just people weren't finding. So I'm trying desperately. Like, I don't know what the show just got on TikTok recently. Like, when I say I'm getting ahead of things, that's kind of half a lie. Like, I'm not really ahead of anything, but I always, the Blockbuster thing scares me so much, man. Like, I'm not a big like Gary Vaynerchuk or TED Talk guy, but I just remember like listening to him talk about Blockbuster and like how sad it was that like they saw what was happening and just sort of said, yeah, but we'll do it our way anyway. Like,
everybody put your hands in, team.
Right. Like, let's just pretend like there's not a hurricane outside. Like, it's very Fyre Fest, right? Like, or we can just be legends if we pull it off. Like, no, you can't pull it off. You can't change history. So, yeah, it was weird. It was heartbreaking. I tell people all the time, like, I wish I was a couple years younger, because when I was in college, I was learning how to edit video on actual reels. Like, that's how I learned to edit video. And that has served me zero purpose in my life. Like, none. I obviously couldn't do it now. It's 20 years later, whatever it is. But at the time, I was capable of editing video, like splicing tape. I could do that.
The last of the Mohicans.
Correct. And it was never going to serve me a purpose, because within 3 years, no one would ever do that again. So there's a part of me that wishes I never learned anything about social media in college. Like, I was right at the tail end of Gen X, and I was so far behind like so many people that are much more knowledgeable than me about new media and how all that works, to the point where it's limited me in the jobs that I can have. My wife's letting me know that I'm too loud, by the way. That's a problem. I get that all the time in my life.
Yeah, I couldn't see that.
I love to hear it. Love to hear the adjustment, but at the same time, I guess not as much of a question. And Jake, I know you've got a bunch written down, but to me, that's why I do love Pressbox, because there is this, in my mind, it's like a BLT sandwich on white bread with mayonnaise and a side of potato chips and some Oreos and milk. It's comfortable. It will always have someone that enjoys it, and it will always be a staple of what people like to consume in that sense, having that kind of unique voice, that grassroots objectivity, and the desire to spread stories. So that's really why we wanted to bring you on. So I'm kind of happy we got into that. And like I said, I don't have a ton of questions for you necessarily. I know Jake does, but I just want to hear some stories, Jake. So Jake, get Glenn going. It's time to get Glenn going.
Guide me.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, we should probably so you said you came back here in 2007, and that's sort of like, I wrote that time period down. I knew it was like right around that time. And I'm curious, like, what is that like from, obviously we know you're all over the Orioles, but like, we're a Ravens show. So that's a big time for the Ravens with 2008. You have Harbaugh coming in, Billick out, like, you're coming back to town, you're covering this team. What is that scene like?
It was awesome. It was a lot of fun, man. Jake, you and I were talking about Joe Flacco a couple weeks ago, and I had this really unique circumstance. For all of the things that Nestor Aparicio has done wrong in his life, one of the things he did well was when Joe Flacco was drafted, he went over there, introduced himself, and created a connection, and convinced Joe to come on with us once a week during his rookie season. Now, remember, we didn't at that point know that Joe was going to be playing in his rookie season. Of course, everybody
he was not
remembers,
supposed to at all.
Yeah, it took Kyle Bowler getting hurt and Troy Smith nearly dying for Joe Flacco to end up being the starting quarterback. So it worked out really well for us. And, we would talk every week. I actually had to talk to him twice a week because he was also doing something for the website at that point. And he was dull. Like, I got to be honest about it. Like, when his father describes him as being painfully dull, like, a lot of it was painfully dull. In fact, and Drew will tell the story. So Drew and I had to split response. One of the things we did was Joe was writing a blog for our website once a week. I promise you, Joe Flacco never wrote a single blog for our website. But the night before, we would call him and say, "Hey, Joe, what do you want us to put in this thing? Like, what do you want us to say?" And by like week 6, Joe was kind of over it. And like, we would call and he would just say, "Dude, what do you think I should say? Like, what will people like? Like, what'll make them happy?"
I'm all tapped out here. Yeah.
Right. 100%. Like, and I get it. He's doing press conferences and he's doing interviews and all that. So like, what more could he possibly say? So we'd be like, "Hey man, did you listen to the Jay-Z album that came out?" He'd be like, "No." But we would try so desperately to find something that maybe could give him like a personal voice. And there was never anything there, but I liked him a lot. Like, he was a really good guy. I told a story the other day on the show. I was, again, you got to keep in mind, I was 25 at the time. So one night I was out and I was drunk, and a buddy of mine got my phone and drunkenly dialed Joe Flacco at like 11:30 on a Friday night. And I was unaware of it. And on Sunday, I'm in the locker room and he just sort of grabs me. He's like, "Dude, what the hell was that the other night?" And I'm like, what the F? Like, what? I was mortified. I had no idea. He told me about it. And I was, yeah, right. And he was very cool about it. I liked Joe. He was a really good guy, even though he wasn't the most gregarious. And over the years that we would keep talking, like, I just found this like really interesting layer to him, and it would come out a few times. And Jake, when you and I were talking, I was sharing, I had forgotten until recently, there was a night we were out doing a show, and out of nowhere, I don't remember how it came up. I said something about like, well, they were saying on ESPN the other day, and he just went off. He was like, "You know why I stopped watching ESPN?" I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "We just won a huge game on Sunday. Do you think they had any highlights on afterwards? Do you think they cared? All they talked about was Tim Tebow. I'm sick and tired." Like, he just went off, and it was great. And it was funny. And he didn't care that somebody like that loves Tim Tebow was going to be mad about it. It didn't bother him. He was like, "I'm going to just be me. Like, that's what I'm going to do." And of course, famously, everybody remembers the night we were out and, before the Super Bowl year, and it was the day after Joe Linta had told the Baltimore Sun, "Hey, you got to pay Joe like he's a top 5 quarterback because he's a top 5 quarterback." And there had been all this, back and forth. And I knew we were doing this event at the ill-fated Bateman's in Perry Hall. And I just said, I'm gonna go with it. And I said to Joe, I'm like, "Hey, Joe, your agent's out here talking about just top 5 quarterback." And I knew he would bite because I just knew him well enough at that point to know exactly what he was going to do. And of course, he famously says, "I don't think I'm a top 5 quarterback. I think I'm the best quarterback." And it goes everywhere for a week. And then we ended up having fun with that. And he made, if you watch I think it was the America's Game documentary.
Yep.
They show the clip at the beginning, and then right afterwards, Joe makes fun of me for the question. Like, he's like, "It was a really dumb question." And like, we've had fun with that over the years. I just really liked them. And I like those guys. I like, Ed Dixon and I were really close. And Arthur Jones was a guy I was really close with. And, guys, like, it's a fine line for me. I've never hid from the fact that I grew up here. This is my home. And when the Ravens arrived, when I was 13 years old, I was a Ravens fan. I was going to be a Ravens fan. That was the way it was going to work. So I vividly remember the first time I was in the locker room, and, I just needed to talk to, maybe it wasn't the first time, maybe it was a little bit later. I needed to talk to Ray Lewis about something, and I didn't think it was appropriate at the press conference. And I can't remember what it was. So after he walks away from the podium, I go to walk with him and I just say, "Hey, Ray, can I talk to you for a second?" And I remember him snapping back at me, and it was like, "Glenn, what the hell? I just did a press conference." And, for a minute I was startled, and then I was like, "Dude, Ray Lewis knows who I am." Like, he knows my name. team. And like, I couldn't hide from it. It was cool to me. Like, that was a cool thing, having that moment, being a kid that grew up here. So, dude, it was amazing. Like, it was an amazing time. Everybody thought that what a disaster '08 was going to be. It's my favorite season in Ravens history. Like, even more than Super Bowl years, because it was just so wildly unexpected. Like, we all were prepared for a disastrous season in '08 and giving John Harbaugh and Joe Flacco time. And then you have the game in Dallas, which might be the greatest, game in Ravens history, and the run to the playoffs and being around all of it. Dude, I don't even have, we did an event in Nashville the night before that game with Steve McNair. And like, all these Titans fans got livid because they found out that Steve McNair was going to show up at a Ravens pregame event the night before the Ravens-Titans playoff game in '08 or January of '09. And I just remember like getting a 4 a.m., literally 4 a.m. phone call because he canceled. Like, he just said, dude, it's bad. Like, it's bad. They're very mad at me here. I can't do it. And we were bummed because we had been promoting it, but like, whatever, like, Ravens fans wanted somewhere to hang out. It's not like people weren't going to come to the party. And literally Thursday night, Friday night, whatever it was, he calls me at 4 a.m. and he's like, Glenn, man, I like you guys so much. Like, I just got to do it. Let's raise some money for the kids. And I was like, dude, this is awesome. Like, this is so cool. I'm 25 years old and Steve McNair is calling me at 4 a.m.
He's got something in his conscience at 4 a.m. that needs to get off to you.
Right? Like, I couldn't help it. I loved it, man. And did it make me the most credible reporter? I don't know. Like, people can have their own opinions about that, but it was just incredible fun for me to be around those teams and to get to know those guys. And, I was close with Derek Mason. I'm still close with Derek Mason, and he yelled at me plenty at the time. Like, he would scream and lose his mind about things. He was like, he had a chip, he had an edge, but he knew, unlike a guy like Steve Smith, who like would never apologize in a million years. He would belittle you, and then you just had to, Derek Mason would undress you in front of other people, and then like the next day be like, dude, I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened, man. My bad. We cool. Like we would do that type of stuff, and it was the best entree into Baltimore media that I could have ever asked for. Being around those guys, and I don't, like, people bring it up too. Like, I knew then how like, you're walking around the locker room, you're like, there's Ray Lewis, there's Ed Reed, there's Terrell Suggs, and sometimes they'd be conversational. And there's Marshall Yonda, who I was actually really close with Marshall at that point. It's not always like that. Like, not every locker room is always going to have that amount of larger than life figures. I mean, Lamar's a celebrity, right? But like, you were walking around Hall of Famers constantly and just having conversations with them about football and about life. Like,
and this stuff is still pre-social media, and before that world, the character, the gregarious nature of those players was the theater, and now it's all digital.
Spencer, I'm glad you brought it up, because it also in a way made them more interested in talking to you, because they had no access just themselves.
They had their like, for instance, now Patrick Queen's got a T-shirt line, Instagram, Twitter, boom,
exactly,
boom,
right.
It's done.
He doesn't. Those guys, a lot of them are still really good guys, or still see the value. And I know you guys have players on all the time, and we do like the player shows, and these guys are great.
You guys have been with Tybo for what, 2 years now?
Who's awesome. Who's one of my favorite human beings on the face of the planet. Truly. And I've known a lot of these guys, but might be the best human that I've ever come across in this organization. But at the time, they kind of needed you, and I would have guys that would come up to me and be like, "Dude, let me call into your show on Friday." Like it almost was competitive at times. Like, I would walk in, and one of those guys, Paul Kruger, would be like, "Hey, bro, how come you've never asked me to call in?" Like they really wanted you to help them get their message out and to help them brand themselves. And before we realized you shouldn't have guys on the phone while they were driving to work, when Drew and I were doing mornings, like literally every day of the week, we would have a different, like Ray Rice would call in at 6:30 in the morning just because he was driving to the facility. Like, we would time it out to have a different player call in, like literally go in, and we'd be like, "Hey man, tomorrow morning when you're driving in, why don't you call in?" And they'd be like, "Yeah, absolutely, I'll do that." And like, that those days will never happen again. There'll never be another time where something like that would occur, but the guys love doing it. And, the team didn't fight you about it. The team was happy that you were promoting them and introducing them to the guys, and they didn't have like the full on website and all of the capabilities that they have now in order to promote the players themselves. So, man, it was an amazing time to be getting into that business and to be connecting. And, John Harbaugh would bust my balls. Like I was fat at the time. Like due to the drinking and it was bad. And so like, he would come over to me and be like, "Hey bro, we need to get you into the gym. Like, what do we need to do?" And then, I remember after the playoff game in Kansas City, remember after Ed Reed's brother had passed away, like he was really emotional and he came up to me and he grabbed me and just hugged me and like held on to me for a minute. And I was like, all right, man, I hope nobody sees this, because they would probably think that, this is awkward. Like, you give me a hug. But it was really an incredible time for being there and getting to know it. And, I could never have asked for a better opportunity as I was trying to sort of carve my path.
Yeah, what you're hitting on there kind of reminds me weirdly of when I was at Salisbury in like the early and mid 2010s. And like I would be, I didn't get into journalism for a variety of reasons, but I took a couple classes and like I remember covering the football team and like having to do projects on them. And I'd like have to involve players sometimes. They'd be like, "Man, they don't want to do this shit. Like they don't care." And then I'd go to them and be like, "Dude, I'd love to do it. I want to get myself out there a little bit." So like it's kind of weirdly like on a small scale, I can relate to that a little bit. It makes me wonder like, how have your tactics like changed at all? Has your coverage changed at all as social
Massively.
media has become like a thing? Like, can you get into that a little bit?
Yeah, it had to, man. Like it had to change, because guys don't need you to tell their stories anymore. Like they can tell their stories just fine. You know what I mean? And so you have to find other ways or other interesting things. Like I think a lot of people, so we're running now, the Tyus Bowser show is airing on The Fan on Friday nights. It airs at 8:00. We re-air it after it was live on Tuesdays. And I'll find myself saying, like, tomorrow night, your best friend, Jake, Marlon Humphrey, is our guest this week. And
who we all had the pleasure of hanging out with the other night. Very sociable, affable guy. And yeah, it was great.
But Marlon, I never know. Marlon was amazing. Like Marlon was incredible on the show this week. But like the second segment of the show, we literally just dive into his terrible trash food takes, right? Like that's basically the entire second segment of the show. And I know that someone listening to 105.7 The Fan tomorrow night is going to be like, "Why am I listening to this idiot, like talk to Marlon Humphrey about Indian food? Like what? I want to know about what it is that happened in the game last week and all that stuff." Like I get that, but I had to sort of change the way that I did things, because otherwise these guys don't want to talk. Like they're out. Now what came from that and having that fun conversation was, Marlon really did open up and he talked more about, the sort of powerless feeling of watching things on Sunday and, the unique ways that, like, it's funny because now we see the Wired video of him showing how it is that the Jalen Waddle runs, but he was talking about that on the show. Like you don't see it. It's so much different than someone who's just got straight line speed. And that's one of the unique things about defending those guys. And one of the reasons why it's tricky. And, I'd never heard that before, but I needed to talk about some other things to open it up. So, some people like my style. Some people don't like my style. That's fine.
Can I go on a mini rant for 30 seconds?
Please.
I'm seeing that exact video you're talking about where they're talking about Tyreek Hill. And I just want to get it out there into the universe that obviously the people, I see everyone flipping out on Twitter. This isn't Ray Lewis and Ed Reed. They never talk, blah, 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 blah. Clearly that video is edited together so that when Marlon Humphrey and Marcus Peters are saying that didn't necessarily mean it was directly after that touchdown was. Have you ever watched a reality TV show in your freaking life, man? So that's my 30-second rant. I'm done.
Spence, by the way, give me 30 seconds, right? We need to get a hold of ourselves. Like, I am frustrated that the Baltimore Ravens lost a football game too. Don't get me wrong. I'm frustrated by it. And if you tuned into the postgame show that Rita and I do, I'm frustrated by it because I believe that the idea of a postgame show is let me match the tenor of a fan base. Like, let me meet you where you are.
Or they'll hate you. They'll hate you if you don't.
Or like, I hate the thing where like, I'm just not supposed to care. Like, I'm just supposed to walk in and be like, well, the Ravens lost a football game today.
And here are the finals. You're not a journalist.
Right.
You can't be a fan.
I'm doing a show with Ravens fans. Like that's who the show is for. Like, I know how you're feeling right now. but there's a limit to that. And a friend of mine, someone who I personally love, like when I posted that Marlon Humphrey was joining us Tyus Bowser's show, said, "Tell Marlon to stop tweeting." And I literally wanted to throw my phone at them.
Dude, I think it's
moment.
I think doing the recap thing is therapeutic too, because I was fucking pissed. Like, I have not been like actually mad at a game like that in a long time.
Yeah, you
And
were making like weird, like usually Jake says like, all right, blah, 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 like he says it is September. You said like it was September 22 or something. I can't remember.
Dude, I was barking. I was livid, and I got it all out in that night. And like the next day I was still a little mad, and then the day after that I was fine. And now like it's like for the people that I feel like they're not in it, they can't like get it all out in that place. They use social media, they use whatever to like kind of get their feelings out, and it just kind of dribbles out in that way. I don't know. Maybe there's something to that.
Like what's really weird to me is I genuinely believe that there are a group of people that think that basically the Ravens players are supposed to act like the Queen died for 7 days and go into a period of mourning and sit Shabbat, right? Like, or what is it? I'm sorry. What do you call it? Shiva. Thank you. Sit Shiva, and like not leave their homes, and just like Marlon Humphrey tweeted out, "I take some solace in the fact that the other AFC North teams lost today too." Which, by the way, literally every Ravens fan was thinking.
Most players will say that was like something that fans I feel like should
and was exactly what I was thinking. Like I was rooting with a fervor against the Bengals.
They lost. It sucked, but
it doesn't make it better that the Ravens, of course, blew a 21-point lead in the fourth quarter. Like it doesn't fix that in any way. But literally every Ravens fan on the planet was thinking, well, hey, it could be worse. All the other teams in the division lost too. Literally every single one. Marlon Humphrey tweets it out, and it was like he said, "F them kids," or something like that. It was like he said, "I hate you all, and I don't care." And it just blows me away how lost we are. Like, we're just so, like, I assure you, every one of those dudes is frustrated. The other one that drove me nuts is people getting mad at Justin Fields for saying, like, "I promise you we're angry about it." Like, would you prefer him to say, "We don't care, we think you're angry about it"? Like, is that what you want him to say? Everything. I don't know what's happened. I think we have so much access now.
Yep, that's exactly the words that went in my brain.
Yeah, it's bad for us. It's bad for us because we lose touch with reality, man. Like, dude, those guys are pissed. They're livid. Like, I assure you, they're livid.
But I digress. At the same time, Marlon Humphrey's probably lost now in his life. Not a ton at Alabama, not a ton at Hoover High School.
Right.
But, he's what, year 6 now? Dude's probably lost 45, 50 games in the NFL. Like, it's like sticking if you're someone who has diabetes, the first time you stick, it hurts. The 50th time, you're like, all right, that sucked, but
you just got to do it.
I've done it before. I've dealt with this before. You're not supposed to, grieve the loss of a spilled glass of milk the same way every time throughout your entire life.
And it might be different for a rookie too, who's just like, man, I just want to make it to next week. Like, I don't care about it's not that I don't care about winning or losing, but like, I'm just worried about like keeping my job. Like,
but imagine if
that's what it is. It is a job. It is their job.
Correct. It is their job. But imagine if, like, today, when they're supposed to be getting ready for another football game and like figuring out what Nelson Aguilar brings to the table and things like that, if they were still distracted by obsessing over the last football game, like, it just makes no sense. We are terribly confused at the best. And I get it. Like, there's only I always say this, there's only 17 football games during the course of a season, right? And so there's always going to be overreaction. It's the way that it's going to go. It's been difficult for me this week because I try to be pragmatic. That's kind of my style, is like, I don't want to fly off the handle. I'm not going to be the guy that fires everyone. Let's talk about it. And by Monday, the part where I had to say, look, it's week 2. It's one game in a bizarre effing league where crazy things happen every week. Like, yes, it's insane that they blew a 21-point lead in the fourth. Like, I still can't believe I'm saying those words. It's insane that they did that. But also the way that football's changed, and, I don't know if we're ever going to run the ball again in football. Like, I think this is going to happen again in the future. I think there are going to be more 20. The NFL wants this. They want.
The Ravens did it last year to the Colts. It was the same thing on the other show. The Ravens beat the Colts at home in that exact ssame fashion.
It happens, and that doesn't make it okay, and it doesn't mean that you don't talk about what the problems are, and it doesn't mean that you don't say, hey, was it good that they went out and signed Jason Pierre-Paul because they are so thin at edge rush, but can he really help? But talk about all those things. Talk about there's a part of me that really is at the point where I'm worried that, like, hey, just getting J.K. Dobbins back fix the run game? Like, really? I definitely think he's better, but can they be a dynamic run game? Like, it's so bad. It's so they can't run the ball. So let's talk about those things. But we do, at some point, we have to get back to reality, and we do have to be able to look ourselves in the mirror and say, it's week 2 of a 17-game NFL season. What are we doing here? If this happens 4 times during the course of the season, dude, let's talk about it. Like, let's have a conversation. Somebody's probably going to lose a job at that point. But, bro, like, reality has got to strike at some point. And for some people this week, reality has been very difficult, man. It has been a very difficult week for sitting down, like, getting a hold of ourselves and just moving forward.
You're hitting on literally so much of what I've written down. And I guess I'll just sum it all up by asking, like, what is the future of the relationship between fan and franchise look like? Because it feels like there's just so much divisiveness, and it just kind of feels...
We're also on the precipice of the next generation has already fully entrenched themselves. Gen Z is in these media forms. Now the next generation is about to start trickling on in and being involved. That generation's about to start being 14, 15 years old.
So I work, boy, man, the people in my business would hate me for saying this. I've said for a long time, I think we have too many sports writers, and like, people get bothered by that. Like, I'm not supposed to say that, but it's sports, man. Like, it's entertainment. It's a fun thing. I think we have too many fashion writers. Like, we have too many, like, when I say too many, I mean, if you can get the job, God bless you. Like, I'm not trying to prevent you from doing the thing that you want to do, but it's just not as important as we make it out to be. It's not so scary important that we have 6 different people that are all there to tell us who's doubtful on an injury report that was emailed to us on a Friday afternoon. Like, I don't want to take anything away from any of those guys, because I love those guys, and I think they work hard, and I think they do good work. I do think it's important that the media exists, because there are times where, like, I think in Washington, it's been critical that there be legitimate reporters covering a franchise that, is horrendous, is heinous, is doing truly terrible things. And you need to try to hold them to task. So, it's a fine line, but I think we don't need to have as many sports writers. That being said, what I worry is that as we move to the next generation, there's almost no attempt to hold anyone accountable. And holding accountable to me isn't, why'd you make the decision that you made on 4th down? Like, that, it's not that big of a deal, whatever happened on 4th down in a football game. Like, it's a big deal to bettors. It's a big deal to us in the moment, but it doesn't change our lives. But it is a big deal when, like, taxpayer money is funding stadiums, that we know that, like, that money is being used, and that we ask questions like, hey, should the high school state playoffs be being played at the stadium that we help pay for? Like, should the public be able to use the stadium for more things during the course of the year?
As a public facility.
Correct. Like, those are important questions that we need to ask, and that need to be answered. Like, we need to have that. And what I worry is, I say, hey, we don't need as many sports writers. What I worry is that we get more of the opposite, which is that we end up having, the goal isn't to get into media. The goal is to, work in social for the team. The last thing that somebody wants to do is work in media. And again, I just don't, when I keep saying I don't think we need this many football writers, I do think we need a strong media to exist. I do think we need people to be willing to ask questions about, public trust with an ownership. And, as much as I've never believed that the Orioles were moving, when these things pop up, somebody's got to be able to go to John Angelos and say, dude, you still have to answer the question. Like, there's a lawsuit out there with an allegation. And while, yes, it was baseless, it was thrown in, just to get people worked up. You still have to answer the question to somebody who's independent. So I do worry that there's less and less interest in getting into sports media, and more interest in, I want to make fun TikToks on, and I love that content. It's not like I think it's bad or it's hurtful. I want that to exist, and I worry about that a little bit. The fan and franchise thing is, it's fascinating to me, because as much as there's more access, I do think there's a greater divide. The value of the franchises, particularly in football, has so little to do with the market itself. I think you see that, like, For example, the Ravens are really concerned. They want to do a lot of national media appearances. They want their players to call into the Jim Rome show. They want that type of stuff. And they're a little, Rich Eisen, exactly right. And they're not quite as concerned about the local media because the value of the franchise, unlike in baseball, where the value of the franchise really is driven hyper locally, the value of a football franchise, because there's no, TV market, like you're not going to make money off of your radio broadcast. That's not going to be profitable to you. It's not local the same way. And I worry about that a little bit because I do think that it misses. I talked about this a lot when Tony Siragusa passed away. Like, I don't know that the average 25-year-old who might be aware of Tony Siragusa and, he was a good player and he was a personality. I don't think they have any clue like what happened in Baltimore when Tony Siragusa almost single-handedly went out and built a fan base, like went from bar to bar and went and did not care if you were wealthy, if you were poor, who you were, what you looked like. He was going to go out and sort of be the Pied Piper. And, he was making money to make appearances, but he took it upon himself to say, I want you to come be a Ravens fan. I want you to accept this new franchise. And that had to happen in 96, 97, 98, 90. Like, it had to happen until the Ravens won a Super Bowl. And it's hard to explain that to a young person who all they ever know is like the Ravens are the most important thing that exists in the market. But it wasn't the case in 98. Like, we were still kind of feeling it out. There were still awkwardness from people that remembered the Colts being ripped away from them and didn't love the fact that we ripped the football team away from another city. Like, it's hard to fathom that, but some of your grandfathers and fathers couldn't bring themselves to stop rooting for the Horseshoes. Like, it's tough to explain that, but it was real. And I do worry that the connection between community and franchise doesn't erode. It'll never erode. And the Ravens still go out and do plenty of things. They take, alumni and they go out and, do these events on Fridays.
A lot of it feels like it's for the kids more so now.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. It won't erode, but it will never quite be the same between, it's almost just assumed. Like, of course the city loves us. Of course the city lives and breathes for this franchise. So I worry about the actual touch. One of the reasons why I wanted to bring back player shows, it was a big deal. And we didn't do player shows for years. And it used to be, you guys remember, like in those 08, 09, dude, there were like 3 player shows a night around town. Like,
Dennis Pitta used to come to a restaurant. I'm from Hampstead, Maryland. And that's
Greenmount Station.
Middle of nowhere. He used to come to Greenmount Station once a week. And
I did those shows with him, and I loved it.
Small little place. And Dennis would come out and do a show.
You guys made a hell of a crab cake, actually, Spencer. It was one of the better,
you remember that. Like, that's a big deal.
Dude, that's called character. That's something that has character and gusto. And
it was a big deal to me to say. And one of the things I've loved most about Tyus is when we pitched it to him, he completely saw that. And you guys, you met Tyus last week at this event that we did. He's not the most gregarious guy in the world. He's not a larger than life personality, but he's this really kind person.
He's a very smiley.
There's a warmth
present
there with a guy who's like plays a very violent position. There's a warmth that you can very easily discern.
He's unbelievable, man. Like, I tell the guy I love him every time I see him, and like, I mean it. I genuinely love this human being, and I want other people to have those feelings. I want there to be a touch between player and community. And so, we got out of the player show market because it was oversaturated and the guys, were asking for a lot of money in order to do it. And it just, you couldn't, from business sense, make it work. But I was hell bent on it 2 years ago. I said, it's gone. Like, there just isn't a touch. Like, you could, pay $100 to go to one of these autograph signings and, hi and bye and get your autograph if you want. Like, those things still exist. But this thing where you're out and you're talking and you're telling stories and, people are feeling it and then coming up and asking you about them. That was what made these player shows so special. When I was, young, I went to them in town. Like, that's my Tony Siragusa thing. It's like, I was still young enough that I was a fan. I wasn't in the media. Like, he meant a lot to me. Obviously, the fact that I was kind of a fat kid like that, of course, he was the guy that we all looked up to. but I wanted that with more players. And Marlon stayed. We were at Skipjack's Crab Neck in Middle River, and Marlon not only drove there on Tuesday night, but he stayed and made sure he met every single person that was there, because we just had this sort of vibe and connection, and it was a fun atmosphere. And that's why it was so important to me. I so badly want those things. And I get the team is worried about what guys are going to say, and they're worried about headlines. And so they would rather there be less times where guys are out talking, where they're not, having a PR person literally standing over them in the moment. But there's something that's missed there between the fan and the franchise. And I can only do I'm not the troops. Like, I'm not trying to say that we're doing something heroic by taking a player out and having fun with them, but I do think it matters. And I do think there should be more of an attempt made by the franchises themselves to say, hey, we need to connect, and not just connect, which and some of this sounds like I'm taking a shot. The Ravens do an amazing job. They really do an amazing job with charities and connecting that
Community
way and
impact.
having the guy.
Yeah.
Like, I never want this to come off like I'm saying specifically. I think it's a broader thing than that. I think guys are making more money. They don't need to do these things the same way.
Well, I do feel like in this specific example, Glenn, you're talking about these two guys that the Ravens paid, because part of that and the family kind of culture specific to the Ravens is because they paid Marlon Humphrey, whose father was Bobby Humphrey, who grew up going to Alabama events and Denver Broncos events. Marlon gets it, and that's why they understand and say, hey, we would love to pay this guy $100 million because we would love to have him be a Raven for life in this
and
community.
represent us.
Tyus Bowser is the same thing. Another guy. They don't need a PR guy. They know that. They're like, those guys can go. Kyle Hamilton, he's not going to be running around town, doing a bunch of stuff in his first year, but maybe in a few years. But the kind of story that you're telling to me feels like the expected death of cinema, and how you think that, okay, the movie's dead, we watch it in our house, but nonetheless, people want to listen to the players. People want to see the players. People want to know the person. They want to experience it. And going to the movie is an experience and an activity that is something you can bond with your family over. You can bond with your loved ones over. It's something to do together that brings people together and makes you feel that sense of community. So it's never going to die. It just is going to keep changing. But it feels like it's coming back, and the podcasts and all of those things. But those are obviously blowing up. Richard Sherman's doing all those things, but just long story short, it feels very much like, the expected death of cinema.
It's a great comparison, man. It really is, because I get excited about going to a movie. You know what I mean? Like, I can't lie about that. There's just something about remembering being a kid and being 16.
I don't even
and
give a
being
shit anymore. If the movie sucks, if I'm happy to go see whatever movie, because I know I'm just going.
I miss, like, now with having kids, like, I can't just go to like movies all the time, but like, I love going and sitting, and I'm a curmudgeon. Like, I refuse to be price gouged. So like, I won't even buy like soda and popcorn. I'm that guy. Like, no, like we can go out beforehand, but I still just love being in a freaking movie theater. I love doing the stupid. I'm a rube. I still do the thumbs up, thumbs down thing for every movie trailer, and I will for the rest of my life. There will never be a day where I don't want to look at my friends and say, "Do you like it? Do you not like it?" Like, it's exactly right, Spence. And like, you're finding every little dude. I want to do that every time. I love going to the movies, and you're right. Like, there's something about the experience of going out and hanging out and being in the presence of your favorite football players and knowing you can meet them and say hello, but at the same time, they're talking and it's more human. It's not like them standing at a podium somewhere and being barked at by a bunch of different reporters. Like, they're just having a conversation. And I can't say enough about Tyus. Like, he blows me away. Literally every single, like, Donna from Dundalk will come up and start telling Tyus about how she's been in the Colts corral for 40 years, and he will literally ask her questions about it. Like, he will literally be like, well, why'd you join? Tell me. Oh, your grandfather was in it. Tell me about it. He's just the nicest human being I've ever met in my life, and it's why it's been so cool to me to continue that for another season and as long as we possibly can with him, because the more that guy goes out in the community, the more people are going to be like, bro, I'm glad that guy plays for my team.
Yeah, it reminds me a lot of, it makes me think of like bridging that gap. And I think a lot about Tom Matty, who recently passed away. And, he was at those Colts corrals. He was doing the Saragusa thing in the 60s. And then when the Ravens came to town, he was like, hey, we got to figure out how to do this Colts corral thing for the Ravens. And he helped to, build that fan base up too. And it was really cool, like bridging that gap, I think. And I guess we've been running a while here. So I guess I can kind of close you out, for me at least, with this, like, we're podcasters, right? We are bloggers. We do this part-time. We got one foot in the door, so to speak, with the industry so far. So like, what can we do to kind of help engender that a little bit more, do you think?
Dude, you know what? And like, I'm not saying this because I'm sitting here talking to you. I think you guys both know that I really like what you do. And I don't want this to come off as a shot to anybody else. There are probably a lot of other guys in this community and gals that are really good at, and I just don't know that because I haven't taken in their content the same way. You're going to think that I'm crazy saying this. There's a part of me that's kind of jealous sometimes because I see how you connect with a different type of Ravens fan that, it just doesn't connect with me the same way. And that's, there's something for everybody, right? Like, I understand that. You're in a really good place. And I know that it's probably frustrating because you're like, hey man, like we kind of like to be doing this and not having to work the day job. I understand where that comes from. But, I still have to work three other, I still have to go broadcast games at Loyola. I still have to go broadcast. I'm on staff at Stevenson. It's not like, this is all I ever do. I love your guys' content. I love the personality. I love, this is a straight shoot. And Jake, don't take this personally that we called Spencer because, I've had you on the show, a few times. But the morning I was so worked up about the Steve Young comments. Like, they were just so asinine a few weeks back. And Rita and I were sitting there, like, as we're getting ready to do our show on 105.7, and Rita said, like, why do you think sophisticated is such a stupid word? And I just remembered seeing Spencer explain it on Twitter, like, what's so stupid about calling it sophisticated, which for me, like, the way I was describing it is it's a moving target. Like, you can't define sophisticated. Like, as we joked about, like, if your pinky's in the air while you're throwing the football, does that make it a sophisticated offense?
I fully agree as well. I fully agree. It's so like implying that it was so crass.
Right. Like, what does that even mean? So I like I said, we should reach out to Spencer. I remember Rita being like, are we allowed to have Spencer? I'm like, why the hell would we not? It's our show. Like, we can have whoever we want to have on. Like, I think like what she was saying is the expectation that we always put on these like big national guests. And I'm like, I want to put on anybody that I think is entertaining and has something to offer. And, like, I love that. And so that was why that day we called Spencer and Jake, and I realized, like, hey man, Jake's my guy. I need to have Jake on. So we had you on my show the next day. And like, I genuinely enjoy your guys' content. I genuinely like appreciate how active you are. Like, I can't tweet nearly that much. Like, I just don't have the bandwidth in my life anymore.
I have psychological issues.
Yeah, well, yeah.
But nonetheless, though, Glenn, to send it back though, like, your takes, the way that you are, the way that you operate and your brain works, like that you went down, what does even sophisticated mean? Is it pinkies in the air? Like, when I'm seeing it every day, I see a clip or a bite or a quote from your show, it always just makes me smile.
It does, yeah. Dude, it's a mutual admiration society, but yeah, it's like you influenced us to like be here right now. Think about that.
Dude, that's a powerful thing. Jesus Christ, I'm sorry, first of all. But like this thing with Rex Ryan this week drove me nuts. Like, I get it. Nobody thinks the defense played well. Nobody in the world would attempt to say that the Ravens defense had a good game on Sunday. But trying to thump his chest and compare playing defense in 2022 to when he was the coordinator, it is a different sport.
I mean, and Harbaugh comes with a dagger back to Rex's heart in the press conference this week.
Right,
like, there's a reason Sexy Rexy's sitting in the TV host chair now. He's not still in the trenches with the boys.
But like, every layer of what he said just gets more and more asinine, right? Like, he's calling out Marlon Humphrey, who's not on the field. He's, calling Mike McDonald terrible after his second game. He
called him the hot new flashy coordinator. No one knows who the fuck Mike McDonald is.
That's also that really pisses me off too, because that's punching down. Like, that's not cool. Like, Mike McDonald's like 34 years old trying to make his way in this industry, and you're gonna like,
and has had one bad game in his life.
And and I'm gonna take shots directly at the nepotism of Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay and all of these guys. Born on third, think they hit a fucking triple. This just stuff I read about Sean McVay at this point. You'd think the guy's Bill Walsh mixed with, Vince Lombardi combined because he has one Super Bowl. But Mike McDonald coached high school football. Do you think Sean McVay did? No. He started when he was 23 years old, he had a job with John fucking Gruden. Do you think Kyle Shanahan coached high school football? No. So to go shit on someone who has been so successful, so young, and took the road less traveled, without the benefit of daddy and granddaddy.
And speaking of Rex Ryan,
bullshit.
Buddy Ryan, it's you got a theme going there a little bit.
So and
the
look,
fact
man,
that even went over my head makes me like furious, but also happy.
It's how incestuous the league is sometimes.
It's hard not to ignore. There's a lot of personal stuff there with Rex. Like, he never got over not getting the job when Brian was fired. He never hid from it. Like, he came back for the Ravens' 10-year Super Bowl anniversary and like said a lot of things publicly at that point. I don't know if there's awkwardness about his brother being here last year and Mike McDonald. Like, I don't know if there's something related to that. Like, I was kind of thinking through my head about that this week. But the point is, like, just because what somebody says, like, everybody's mad at Mike McDonald, so it's easy to share out, well, look at Rex taking a shot at Mike McDonald. Well, dude, like, how about a little bit of critical thinking? Like, how about a little bit of this? And I get it. Like, if the defense doesn't get fixed this year, let's talk about that being a problem. Let's get to the end of the year and say, there's a lot of assets on that side of the ball. It can't be this bad, right? Like, let's have that conversation at this point. But just to breathlessly share something for the sake of doing it, man, like, I'll never be on board with just
it's identical
this world.
to Steve Young's comments, and that's why you should tip and support your local beat writers, because they know that Marlon Humphrey was out. They know that Marcus Peters is in his first game back from his ACL. They know the nuance, and these national guys, God bless their souls. They really need the tip in the little cup that they hold up.
Yeah, imagine Steve Young trying to explain why it is the Ravens haven't won a championship. Like, he has any effing clue what happened. Like, with a gun to his head, he couldn't tell you who the Ravens lost to in the playoffs 2 years ago. What was going on in the Bills game. Like, he has no idea that J.K. Dobbins whipped on the block right before the interception. Like, with his life on the line, he wouldn't be able to answer those questions. And I almost hate talking about it because it gives breath to it still. But like this is on us. Like, we have to step in at some point and say, even when something matches what our opinion is, like, I get it. People around here hate Greg Roman. Like, it's just the way that it goes. Everybody hates Greg Roman because they've hated every offensive coordinator that's ever existed. And every one of us that's been around knows.
Except for Gary Kubiak,
except for
Gary
Kubiak, who did the smart thing by parachuting in for 1 year and then leaving. He immortalized forever.
Everybody loved Jim Caldwell for 3 months, and then everybody was ready to pack his bags when we heard that there was teams a year later that wanted to hire him as an offense or as a head coach. So, like, this is the way that it works. But just because somebody is saying something that backs you up doesn't make it intelligent or doesn't make it a cogent argument when somebody brings it up to say, well, yeah, but what about what Steve Smith said?
We need nuance.
Let's have a conversation, man. Let's talk about it. And I have no problem. Like,
and we also reach the point in this society where, and it dives into politics, which is bled into everything, is that there's not conversations, there's only arguments, there's only debates, and there has to be a winner and a loser. There's no gain, there's only a winner and a loser. It can't be. You know what, Glenn? You made some good points. I appreciate that. It has to be, you're fucking wrong and I'm fucking right. Right. Or what's the point here? It's like playing a video game. There's a winner and a loser, and that's it.
There was somebody, and I actually ended up liking the guy. We've actually tweeted back and forth a couple times. There was somebody on Sunday that was getting after me about how much I kept harping about their inability to run the ball and being like, well, they were running the ball too much. They got away from the pass. I'm like, what are you talking about? They ran the ball with running backs 4 times in the second half. What are you saying? They got away from the pass. Like, what? Like, am I living? And I remember at some point he finally said to me, "Yeah, but those are 4 plays they could have thrown the ball, and I bet they wish they would have done that now." And like, at some point, I just finally was like, you know what, dude, fine. Like, sure,
you win. You won this one. You have won the debate.
I'll tip my hat to you. And I hope because if he's listening, I'm sorry, I don't remember what his name is. He's actually a good guy, and we've talked a couple times since then, so all's good. But it was funny in that moment where I'm like, what are we doing? Like, what is going on here? Even my buddy, you guys know Bobby Trossett. He's a friend of mine. Like, I love Bobby. He's my guy. But he was apparently listening to our show on Sunday and was like, I can't believe that you're harping about the run game. They scored 38 points. I'm
was he talking about you guys? I thought he was talking.
I assume maybe he was talking about BA. I don't know, but I assume because it was definitely Reed and I were going on about
we were hanging out. We were hanging out like a couple days before that, and then he tweeted that out. I was like, huh, interesting. Is he talking about Glenn and Rita? Because I know
I didn't take it. I never take these things personally.
Right? Man. Yeah,
I'm never ever take these things. Maybe Bobby would be like.
No, he's our buddy.
I was. Yeah, I like.
He's our buddy too. So we're just happy to bust his balls whenever we get the chance. But
correct. But like, dude, did you watch the game? Did you watch the game? Like, they let a team have the ball for 10 minutes longer than they did, despite the fact that they had a 21-point lead in the fourth quarter. I get it. The defense is a problem, but how do you not see why that is a huge issue? Like, it's a major part of the story.
I mean, I guess to just fully go off the rails and talk about this game that we're clearly not over, like the grand irony of that to me that I just finally thought of is, so we bitch and moan about get to the line, get the call in, let Lamar do the pre-snap thing. Guess what? If they ran it down to 1 second every time, they probably win that fucking game.
Boy.
Now we've really brought it full circle.
I haven't even thought about that this week. I hadn't even thought about it.
That's solution-based thinking, because they break the huddle with 20 seconds and then they stand there until it ticks all the way down. Now I'm bringing solutions to the table here.
Yep. Now we're in a utopic society that Gary Kubiak built for us, and we have just continued to ascend.
Exactly.
Damn, man. Damn. All right. At some point, we're going to stop talking about this football game. At some point.
I guess
there'll be another one on Sunday.
Yeah, there will be, and I guess I can stop us there for me at least. Spenny, you got anything else before we get rolling?
No, man. We've kept Glenn for an hour. His wife's probably mad at him. My girlfriend's probably mad.
Oh, I'm gonna get yelled at so much in a minute. I could have gone up to my office on the third floor, but I was just kind of plumb lazy and didn't feel like walking up
here, Glenn.
Yeah, right. And I just sat down here, and she is gonna scream at me. She's definitely still awake. She's been listening to this entire thing. She's going to yell. Life will go on. We'll all be all right.
Yeah, there will be another fight next week.
I love this. I really do. I want to have both of you guys together come in studio. Whenever your schedules will allow, I would really love to have that happen at some point, but I really do appreciate everything that you guys are doing. And you're two of my favorites in this market to follow and to interact with. And I'm glad that we've developed a friendship.
No, I agree, man.
You're our buddy, our pal. You're our rotten soldier, our sweet cheese as well, my friend.
Yeah.
Ooh, I like all of that.
No, it's weird, man. It's no exaggeration to say that I grew up listening to you to an extent. So
yeah, Jake has been listening to you for years.
So, it's really fun. I was out with Tim Barbalace recently, and he said the same thing to me. And I've said that to a lot of guys over the years, and I've never been on the other side of it where it's kind of like creeped me out a little bit, where I'm like, wait, really?
Yeah.
No,
really? I had the same conversation with Pete Gilbert. He was like, I said the same thing to Vince Bagley in the late 90s, and he was like, Vince Bagley was like, oh, that's weird. And it's funny how that works,
It's really weird. But I first of all, thank you. I'm glad there was at least one person that was
exactly one. Yeah.
I appreciate it, man.
But
thank you so much, Glenn. This was a blast. We'll see you soon, my friend.
Yeah, where can the listeners find you, your show, all that stuff? Do a little plug here before you get going. Yeah,
GlennClarkRadio.com is the best way, or at Glenn Clark Radio on all socials. And then, we do post-game, the Baltimore Game Day Uncensored post-game show. I messed that up about 100 times already in 2 games on 105.7 The Fan, and the Tyus Bowser show. Seriously, this is not like a big push because we have plenty of people that come out. We don't need more people. I just genuinely encourage Ravens fans. Go to PressBoxOnline.com/Bowser to see when and where we're going to be. You will be blown. You will never forget the time that you spent hanging out with this guy and how warm and how gracious he is to every single person. So I seriously would encourage you. PressBoxOnline.com/Bowser. Come hang out with us at Tyus Bowser Show this season.
There you go. Well, he's Glenn Clark. He's the man, as you just heard for the past hour. We got to get him out of here. Thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you again later.
See you.
Arrivederci.
Where is the wise man? Where is the scholar? Where is the philosopher of this age?
What are they getting? Everything out of me. They gonna get a Super Bowl out of me. Believe that. Believe that.